Penguin Random House Audio presents The Brink of Being, Talking About Miscarriage by Julia Bueno. Read for you by Polly Lee, with an introduction and epilogue read by the author. For David.
Introduction. It is commonly estimated that 1 in 4 pregnancies fails to thrive and ends spontaneously in a miscarriage, most before they have been revealed to the world or even suggested by the hint of a pregnancy bump. This can be devastating, extremely physically painful, or both. And yet, despite its prevalence, we have long been unable to talk about miscarriage in any adequate breadth or depth. If we do, we tend to do so awkwardly, quickly, and in the most general terms. We squirm, we whisper, and we avoid asking questions. We just don't understand the experience well enough, or the nature of the complex grief that can hit hard in its wake. But miscarriage deserves so much more than these scant responses it tends to elicit. We need to approach this human experience with greater empathy and an allied compassionate curiosity, so that ultimately we can improve the support that's on offer for all of those who may be affected. I began to learn this in the wake of my own miscarriages. My first one profoundly changed me, inspired a new career, and still fuels my desire to change how miscarriage is perceived. The inklings of my future family began when I was 18 years old and met my now husband, David, on my first day of college. He and his friend had spotted me walking through the swing door of a building near their rooms on my way to visit a friend. I later found them both lying on the ground, blocking my exit. I laughed, we all talked, and then the friend peeled off, leaving David and me to talk some more. Later that night, David introduced me to Van Morrison, and by the time I returned to my room, I knew that I wanted to spend the rest of my life with him. It took another year before he agreed. We both wanted children, but parenthood wasn't on the agenda for a long time. While David fell into journalism soon after graduating, I flirted with academia and then a legal career before moving to an internet startup. But after a decade together, we'd bought our first home in London and were planning a wedding. Having a baby seemed like the next step, and as soon as David agreed to try, a baby was all I wanted. And I wanted it to be like the story I knew the best. I'd get pregnant before too long, grow fat and uncomfortable, and then give birth to a little version of him and me. But this story would never be told. For us, things took a different turn from the beginning. I'd spent many years ignoring my irregular menstrual cycle, disguising what I suspected was a minor fertility issue with the synthetic hormones of the contraceptive pill. When we first discussed trying to conceive, we consulted my sensible general practitioner, who sent me for further investigations. I assumed if anything was awry, there'd be a simple fix. After a scan revealed some unusual findings, I was sent for a laparoscopy. A tiny fibre optic cable was inserted through my abdomen wall to inspect the state of my womb and ovaries. An hour or so later, as I awoke from my drugged sleep of general anaesthesia in the recovery ward, my surgeon appeared, his wild white hair only partly tamed by a surgeon's cap. He excitedly reported what the camera had revealed. I have a unicornate uterus, a malformation that means my uterus didn't fully develop when I was in my mother's womb. It is, in keeping with a medical inclination to describe wombs as varieties of fruit, shaped like a banana rather than the avocado Mother Nature prefers. My surgeon also told me that while I had 2 functioning ovaries, I now had only 1 fallopian tube. The other was barely developed and useless, so he had removed it during the procedure. He handed it to me in a small plastic jar, a grey, gnarled lump of flesh. Baffled at my gift, I was also soothed by the promise of a healthy counterpart. At a follow-up appointment a month later, he was upbeat about my prognosis to conceive and carry a baby to term. My anomalies may have explained my irregular menstrual cycle, and he glossed over the increased risk of pregnancy loss or premature delivery that my abnormal womb could potentially cause. He told me gripping stories of other strange-shaped wombs that had resulted in happy deliveries. I left his consulting room buoyant and with a renewed sense of expectation. An experienced doctor thought a pregnancy could and would happen for me. It took about a year of hopes raised and then dashed before I conceived. I was so consumed with my desire to get pregnant that it eclipsed everything else, including our wedding. I didn't care about the details of my dress or which flowers to choose, as much as the repeated arrival of my period. But at long last, a couple of months before my 30th birthday, and 10 months after our wedding, my familiar bleeding didn't arrive, and I took my first pregnancy test. I still have the white plastic one that proved I had conceived the baby, and, it turned out, another baby, that had long been nestled in my mind. It was only a couple of weeks after my pregnancy was confirmed that our joy was punctured by fears. First, I started to spot, a common experience of light bleeding in early pregnancy that can be caused by the embryo implanting itself in the womb lining. A scan at the hospital around 6 weeks revealed this was probably the case with me, but it also revealed 2 minuscule humans with beating hearts. I had conceived twins. Growing 2 babies inside a banana-shaped womb within my 5-foot frame was never going to be easy. But I remembered the words of my surgeon, and I hoped. The coming weeks brought even more anxiety. I had bouts of sudden and heavy bleeding. More scans showed that a sizable hemorrhage had formed in my womb lining and was struggling to heal. I was told this was probably because my womb had stretched too rapidly, not unheard of with first pregnancies of twins. I became a frequent flyer of the high-risk pregnancy unit, led by an obstetrician with legendary experience in twin pregnancies. I bled copiously and often throughout the following 10 weeks, while also battling intense and relentless nausea that made it difficult to eat. And while our frequent hospital visits assured us that our babies were thriving nonetheless, there were few moments during my first trimester when I could relax into my dreams of a future family of 4. But then, at around 16 weeks, during yet another checkup, a scan showed that the familiar dark patch on my womb lining had disappeared. Suddenly and inexplicably, the hemorrhage had healed. Our hope renewed, I contacted a local support group for new mothers of multiples, and my husband and I began to work out how we would share childcare. My mother started amassing a collection of tiny clothes, and my belly expanded so much that people leapt up from their seats on buses to offer me theirs. We played with names and flew to Italy for a friend's wedding, where I danced all night in a dress that I bought a few sizes too big. This excitement lasted only a month. One sweltering summer's day, 20 weeks into the pregnancy, before leaving for work, I went to the loo, and habituated to check the bowl for blood, I spotted something new. I didn't see a pool of deep red, but a dark green blob of flesh-like tissue. I'd read enough to know that this was my mucus plug, the seal that forms at the neck of the womb to keep infection out. I also knew it could mean that labour would come soon. I called my office to say I would be late, again, and walked to my nearby doctor, eating an unripe nectarine, and clinging to an absurd hope that she would assure me that my body was already making a replacement mucus plug. But deep down I think I knew the truth, that my pregnancy was under serious threat. Without even examining me, the doctor fast-tracked me to the hospital unit that David and I already knew so well. David met me there, as dazed as I was. A scan showed that my cervix was giving way, which would have been fine if it were October rather than July, halfway through my second trimester. My straight-talking obstetrician swiftly made a decision to stitch it, or, as he said, what was left of it. I'd gotten to know his curious bedside manner well over the previous weeks under his care. It was a small trade for his dedication to guarding the safety of complex twin pregnancies. There was no time to go through the usual preoperative rigmarole of fasting, and I was rushed to surgery that night. I awoke in the twilight hours of the following morning, itchy from the morphine, with a nurse filling in my chart beside a small lamp in the room. My mind organised itself slowly, registering relief to feel limbs still moving inside me. The nurse and I talked about the chickens she kept and her constant fear of foxes. I learnt that she had many miscarriages, never fulfilling her dream to be a mother. Her hope for my babies to remain safe inside me for as long as possible.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?